The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
The Pittsburgh Steelers have won the AFC North title.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast.
Can't say enough about how resilient this team was in this win and in this season for the Steelers to go throughout the season the way they did, go the ups, the downs, losing last week, not having DK Metcalf last week or this week, the injuries that they sustained all year, TJ Watt's collapsed lung and how he's had to play through that, the rough stretch where they lost 3 of 4 games from October to November, just time and time again being booed by their own fans, the chance to fire Mike Tomlin, and this team rallies to win 4 of 5 down the stretch twice. They beat the Baltimore Ravens, and doing so in insane fashion in this game. We got a lot to break down. I mean, first of all, the end is bananas. You know, the kick, very Mike Vanderjagt like with going wide right. Tyler Loop missing the kick with 44 yards at the end of the game after Chris Boswell missed an extra point that could have let the Ravens win the game with that kick. But I got to focus on what the Steelers did to win this game. And of all the times that Aaron Rodgers has shown throughout this season to justify him being the guy, justify the reason why the Steelers waited 4 months to sign him, why everyone thought they were crazy. Even myself, I wasn't keen on the move when they were bringing him in. I'm like, he's going to be 42 in November. How are you going to do this? Man, did he deliver in big ways. The Steelers were 9 of 16 on third downs in this game, and Aaron Rodgers was a big factor in making sure that was something that they were able to do. Mind you, they came into this game as like the 19th best third down offense against a Ravens defense that ranked 9th in third down defense. That's a top 10 third down defense. And they came into the league ranking in the bottom half, and they needed it. They absolutely needed it in this game. Aaron Rodgers finished the game 31 of 47 for 294 yards and a touchdown pass. And, of course, it was that 26-yard touchdown pass that he threw to who else but Calvin Austin, who finished the game with 3 catches for 55 yards and that 26-yard touchdown. The Steelers, I thought, were at time early on. They struggled like they have early, but Aaron Rodgers continues to find things in games to adjust, to hit things. He didn't last week against the Browns. He did, a couple of drives where they didn't finish. But in this game, you saw them start slow, but eventually he started to figure things out. The run game started to pick up, and then he started hitting in the weaknesses of the Ravens defense. And again, without DK Metcalf, the guy who's been his number one guy and who's kind of teed everything up for everyone else, it was a huge performance. I also thought it was interesting hearing Aaron Rodgers talk about that play and how the offense had to pull through without DK Metcalf. I want to give you a chance to listen to him talking about the touchdown and how Calvin Austin wasn't even sure. He asked Calvin, what do you want on this play? Calvin wasn't sure, and someone said, cook him. And man, did Calvin Austin cook him with that hitch and go. I forget who the DB was. I think it was Woozier. He fell for the stutter step. Aaron Rodgers saw him and he threw it. Listen to Aaron Rodgers break that play down and give credit to his playmakers in this game who, again, had to deliver without the guy who was designed to be the number one receiver in DK Metcalf. Here's Aaron Rodgers after the game.
Calvin's the sweetest guy. I mean, he is. Just ever since the Malibu trip in the offseason, just have such a love and appreciation for Cal and his disposition. And multiple times in the huddle, I'm asking him on various plays, what do you want on the backside? What do you want on the backside? And he wouldn't give me a straight answer. And on this particular huddle conversation, I said, what do you want, Cal? He said, and somebody to my right, I don't know if it was McCormick or Pat, said something about like, man, just go cook him or something. So I said, all right, Cal, you run the hitch and go back there. And I was really thinking the front side 3-man combination that we worked and had success with most of the night was kind of my first thought. But I just peeked back to the left and saw number 3 slip, and it's a gimme touchdown. But I'm proud of Calvin, and the line really gave me a lot of time all day. They played really well.
What do you think it says about this passing offense? You guys able to make big plays in a big game without DK Metcalf, the guy who's been a leader for you guys a lot this year?
Well, we got a lot of talented guys, a lot of capable guys. Proud of the way that we responded. There's some things that happened in the game that we've been trying to get to the entire season, hadn't really shown up. Like Pat on the second last drive had a big, double up stutter down the middle completion. We've been talking about that thing since Latrobe and haven't really had a lot of opportunities. But he ran just an absolute beautiful route that kind of set us up. Then we had the craziness of the helmet conking out and the personnel groupings we had on the field and the wristband. I mean, it was chaos. But we got to a good call there on third down to run it in, and then the 2-minute drive. Started off with a nice, quick game completion, and I thought we were efficient and had a chance on third down to go to Cal, and he ran a good route, and we made it happen.
Well, Aaron Rodgers talking about there, and I'm going to get him talking about Pat Freiermuth in a minute because he gives him a lot of credit, not just for this game, but for all season hanging in there the way that he has. But I think Aaron Rodgers was like, hey, he was wide open, but go back and watch the route when Calvin Austin hits the butter step on the hitch and go. Woozier just loses his feet. He just completely stumbles. He did cook him. And what a moment for Calvin Austin, by the way, who a lot of people have downplayed him throughout this year. And heck, he's gotten hurt. He hasn't had a chance to be as much of a playmaker as you'd like. But in a game where they needed someone to step up, and I said they needed someone to step up and make a big play down the field. And man, did he do it in the clutchest of moments to make that happen. But this game can't be won without several other guys. Jaylen Warren, 14 carries, 66 yards, also caught all 5 of his targets for 33 yards. He combines for 99 all-purpose yards. Kenneth Gainwell, 5 rushes for 10 yards, nothing big there, but he did get the touchdown run that he had. But he also caught 8 of 9 passes for 64 yards. The Warriors that they are, but can't overlook. I mean, and also I'm not trying to pass up on anybody, but Adam Thielen, 3 catches for 43 yards. He comes in. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, we were giving him a lot last week for not being able to make plays. 5 catches for 34 yards, just solid contributions. But Pat Freiermuth, 3 catches, 51 yards, and just how this guy stays locked in when he's not the primary concern continues to show why this team believes in that guy. I still think it's ridiculous that they don't key up more plays for him to be the primary target and feed him the ball, especially when you don't have a DK Metcalf. But listen to Aaron Rodgers talk about, he acknowledges Pat hasn't gotten the bulk of targets, and he could be pouting. And that's something that we saw George Pickens do a lot last year when he wasn't the primary concern, lollygagging in his routes, not finishing. And even when it was time to come back to him, he wouldn't be as locked in. That's never been an issue for Pat Freiermuth. And he came up in a big way in this game multiple times for 51 yards. I think he had a strike for 14, another strike for 31. The 31 set up the touchdown, I think, for Kenneth Gainwell. Listen to Aaron Rodgers talk about Pat Freiermuth, and I think it'll grow your appreciation as a Steelers fan for not only how good of a player he is, but how good of a soldier he is and how he's never complained, even when he hasn't been getting the bulk share of the targets or the snaps at tight end. Here was Aaron Rodgers on Pat Freiermuth.
Pat Freiermuth hasn't gotten the bulk of targets this year, but he continues to come up, it seems like, in big moments for you guys. What can you say about his focus to be there when you need him, especially in those huge moments today?
I have a lot of respect for Pat, first and foremost. The way he's handled himself this entire season. Pat is a dynamic player, and with the emergence of Darnell and the big personnel that we've done, he hasn't had as many snaps as he's used to or would have wanted. But not one time this entire year, and he's my locker mate, so I can say this with absolute confidence and 100% honesty, not one time did I hear him complain about his snap count, about anything. It was, there's a lot to be said for that. I think that's a lost part of this league, to be able to humble yourself and kind of lean into the collective instead of making it about yourself week in and week out when he knows he can play. And he made plays last week on the 2-minute, and he made plays in the fourth quarter, really all game. I thought we did a good job. Just little things that you talk about in Latrobe and you hope show up. We had a 3rd and 10. We went on a first sound, a center snap by Zach, right, where he just kind of goes up, waits, and snaps it. And they bring strong dog. They bring the mic and they bring 44 off the slot. And we talked from day one when I got here. I like throwing vertical peaks first pressure. So start off by looking vertical. And we actually kind of like made eye contact in the huddle. And just said, be alert. And then sure enough, he widens slightly like he's supposed to. He catches the ball with his hands. He gets 14 yards, and that's a drive continuing. We talked on through routes. If you get two-man, double up, take your time, give him an outbreak look, and then go down the middle. And on the second last drive, he ran an absolutely unbelievable route. And it was just perfect. I mean, I'm literally throwing it, kind of laughing at myself because I'm like, this is it. See, I've been talking about this forever. But I'm just really proud of him. I can't say enough good things about Pat. He is an exceptional human and a great teammate, and there's a lot to be said for that in this league.
NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
The Carolina Panthers are NFC South Division champions for the first time since 2015.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast.
The Atlanta Falcons 19, the New Orleans Saints 17, which means that your Carolina Panthers, for the first time in a decade, since 2015, the first time since 2017, are division champions, and they're headed to the postseason. Take it all in. Take it all in. They had to do it the hardest way possible, but damn it, they did it, man. 8-9, that gets you in. Only in the NFC South, it seems. That is how things can play out. And it had to be this way, right? It couldn't have been the simple way of winning that game against New Orleans back in week 15, even though someone said to me earlier today, do you really believe, considering what we've seen over the last month, that they would have won that game against Tampa after beating the Saints? And honestly, no, considering what we've seen over the last month, but it doesn't really matter now because now they're in the playoffs. They could have made it easy by beating Seattle, even though not really easy considering that the Seahawks are 14-3 and the top seed in the NFC after their win last night against San Francisco. And they could have made it easier by winning yesterday, not rushing for only 1.4 yards per carry, not having a boneheaded flea flicker from the 20 freaking yard line. And yeah, the officials not screwing them over as well. They could have done it the easy way, but it's never going to be easy, right? It's not supposed to be easy, but for the Carolina Panthers especially, do they ever want it to be easy? Nah, they don't. They even said that last Sunday after the loss against Seattle. There wasn't a lot of, frowns and melancholy people in that locker room. Like, yeah, how else would you want it than right here, needing to go on the road against your division rival in Tampa and try to beat them, which, of course, they did not do. They blew it, but here they are sitting at 8-9 and still in the playoffs, hosting a playoff game likely next Saturday. We'll talk about that here momentarily when the game may be here in Uptown Charlotte. And honestly, I'm just happy for y'all. Truly am. I've been doing this show for the last 5 seasons. The Panthers are 27-58 since I've been hosting this show. That record would not lead you to believe that I would have ever gotten the opportunity to do this show and to do the shows we're going to do this week. And hopefully, we'll see. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, of course, but to do this week talking about a playoff game, getting to go cover a playoff game here in my hometown of Charlotte. So really happy for my hometown. Happy for all of y'all who have been here since the beginning of this show, but also been here as Panther fans for years, whether it's been a couple of seasons, been a decade, been since it was announced that Charlotte was getting a team. I'm happy for all of y'all that have been through the ups and downs, had the deal of David Tepper's BS, finally hiring the right head coach, hiring the right general manager, right executive vice president of football operations, and getting a quarterback who, hell, he's had plenty of issues the last 3 years Bryce Young has. But in that game yesterday, he wasn't the problem. Yeah, the interception, not great, but you got what you needed out of your quarterback, and you've gotten what you need out of your quarterback really over the last month of the season, aside from that game last Sunday against Seattle. He's been good enough for you, and certainly there's still issues that this team has heading into the playoffs, but we'll worry about those as we break down this game throughout the rest of the week. This is all about celebrating, being happy that the Panthers have finally got over the top here in the NFC South and gotten back into the playoffs, but they get in because of a three-way tiebreaker. I did not want to give any credence to this possible scenario when it was brought up to me a couple of weeks ago. I was more focused on maybe Tampa and Carolina actually being decent teams and getting in at 9-8 or at 10-7 and how the tiebreakers would work out that way. But there was always that distinct possibility that Falcons, led by Kirk Cousins, who I'm pretty sure just played his last game as an Atlanta Falcon, maybe his last game in the NFL this Sunday. There was always a possibility that the Kirk Cousins-led Falcons, with Raheem Morris on the hot seat, could win their final 4 games and set up a three-way tiebreaker with Carolina being at 8-9, Tampa at 8-9, and Atlanta at 8-9. I didn't want to believe it. I really didn't. I also didn't really believe that there was any possible way that the Bucs were going to lose to the Quinn Ewers-led Miami Dolphins, and I have been wrong all along the way, and good thing I have been wrong, because I'm wrong plenty of times, of course. But look, this is where they're at. It was a three-way tiebreaker, all 3 of those teams sitting at 8-9, and it got to division record, which they're all tied at 3-3. Then it came down to head-to-head win percentage among the 3 teams. Carolina, they are 3-1. Tampa is 2-2, and the Falcons are 1-3. And that now allows the Panthers to be NFC South Division champions by way of the tiebreaker. I guess technically they tie for first place, but the team that gets to go play for the Lombardi Trophy here starting this weekend is a team here in Charlotte. So congratulations to all those guys for getting that opportunity. And thank God for the back door. I sat there on Monday and kind of was like annoyed by the fact that the Rams, a team that I've really been gassing up over the last couple of weeks on Locked On NFL, even on this show when we had the crossover episode, that they've just completely fallen apart and they couldn't beat this Falcons team. But it did leave the back door open. I like the stakes of you either get it done or you don't. And when you look at it, if the Panthers are 8-9 and the Bucs are 8-9, and of course Atlanta's 8-9, like, are any of these teams deserving of being in the playoffs? I mean, no, but what does deserve have to do about it? Nothing at all. And here's the thing, like, don't apologize that this team won the division, that your team won the division, and that this team's going to be playing for an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl, which unlikely going to happen. My buddy who covers the Pats texted me saying, see you in San Francisco. I would love for that to be the possibility, Tom, as I mean, New England, they're certainly going to be in a great spot, even though they have a team that hasn't really been in this position, which Carolina hasn't as well. But there are plenty of Super Bowl winners on this roster, especially defensively, that can help them moving forward. Didn't really help them the last month as they kept blowing it, but hey, they're in it. And Nick Scott talked about this in the locker room last night after that loss in Tampa, saying, quote, I could not care less, man. A hat and t-shirt is a hat and t-shirt. This game is all about getting into the dance. Then once you're in the playoffs, anything can happen. Clean slate record doesn't matter. I've seen teams that, quote unquote, have no business being in the playoffs and knock somebody off in the first round. I don't care how I get in. I just want to get in. Well, congratulations, Nick. You're in. And like, he's right. We've seen it so many times, and the home field aspect of it is why we've seen those upsets with teams that shouldn't be in the playoffs. And I guess we can throw Carolina in that category. Well, the last time we could say that about the Panthers 11 years ago, back in 2014, when they were 3-7-1 and then won out to get to 7-9-1 or whatever it was, 7-8-1. Yeah, they won 4 games in a row to get 7-8-1. That was a team that no one felt like should be in the playoffs. And, is the division format, the playoff format, the right format for the NFL? And we heard about that last year when Sam Darnold led Minnesota Vikings, won like 13 games, blew it in week 18, and then they had to go on the road. Well, they had to go down to Arizona because of the wildfires there in Los Angeles. But had to go on the road, couldn't have a home playoff game, and then they lost. And oh, man, that can't be the case. Well, these are the rules. And this is why you don't apologize, because we all knew when the season began what needed to be done to get into the playoffs, and the possibility that there could be a tiebreaker situation like the one that we've had here right now in the NFC South. Did I think this is how it was going to end when the season kicked off? No, I definitely did not, but I'm happy that this, of course, is the result for Carolina getting in this way. And I mean, look, when they were 7-9-1 or 7-8-1 back in 2014, I've got to get my mind wrapped around that. There used to be 16 games, and now we're on like year 4 of 17 games. That season, they won their home playoff game. Now, the Cardinals were down to their third-string quarterback, Ryan Lindley, and that had a lot to do with them winning that game, but also it was a team that was red hot. Had Cam Newton. Remember that guy? Ended up being the MVP of the league the next season. They had Luke. They had TD. They had plenty of talented players on that roster who had gone 12-4 the year prior, and they had that experience. So it was not necessarily surprising that at home in front of a ruckus Bank of America Stadium that they were able to get the job done. And then the next week, they gave Seattle all they could handle. And what do you know? Looking at how it could play out here, if Carolina is able to knock off either the Rams or the 49ers, they go to Seattle. So maybe that's how it plays out. Again, Brock Purdy did suffer a stinger last night in that game. Don't really think that's going to be something that keeps him out next week in the playoffs. That's a banged up team. The Rams, they've been really weird here over the last half of the season. But that could be the opponent for Carolina, depending on how things play out here. Coming at 4:25 Eastern time as the Rams are facing off against the Cardinals, I believe, in LA. But yeah, look, this team blew it multiple times. They blew it against the Saints. They blew it against the Seahawks. They blew it against the Bucs, even though, like, okay, like the Saints game, as I mentioned earlier, do they come back and actually beat Tampa? Based on what we've been seeing, probably not. The Seahawks game, they're 14-3. They didn't blow it. Yes, it was an opportunity where had they won that game, they're in the playoffs, but that's the best team record-wise in the NFL this season. Hard to say they blew it there. Yesterday, yeah, you didn't do a great job. Refs didn't help. Play calling didn't help. Not being able to run the football, which has been a problem the last 8 games, didn't help. That turnover didn't help. We all understand it, but here they are. New season, clean slate, records don't matter. And here's the thing, too. Like, every game in this league matters. And we're all guilty of thinking, oh, well, they're not going to win this game. Let's just focus on what's going to happen after that. And I certainly did that with the Rams game. I did not think there was any possible way this team was going to beat LA that Sunday, which they were able to do. So every game matters. And it just turned out that this season, the game back in week 3 at home against Atlanta, the game in week 11 down in Atlanta, and the game week 16, a couple weeks ago here in Charlotte against Tampa, those were the games that had overstated importance for Carolina. And this is why they're in the playoffs. They've had their moments where they beat Green Bay, they beat the Rams, and they had their moments where they lost to the Saints twice, and they lost to Arizona. But those 3 games in particular, twice against Atlanta and once against Tampa at home, that's why we're sitting here having this conversation, because they win the tiebreaker with that. Sitting 3-1 head-to-head win percentage against Tampa and Atlanta, sitting at 8-9 and NFC South Division champions, first time in a decade. Soak it in, man. Soak it in. Enjoy it. Celebrate. And I hope everybody can get to that. I mean, not everybody can. Only 73,000 or so seats. But I hope everybody who has the means can get in the stadium and be able to check it out. And I get the frustration last night. You heard in my voice when we talked about it. But we always knew there's still a possibility that we could be turning around less than 24 hours later. I mean, 20 hours later, and be able to talk about the Panthers being division champions, and we were able to do that.
NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
Arthur Blank actually did it. He fired both Raheem and Terry, so perhaps the future is bright.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast.
Less than 5 hours after the Falcons' Week 18 win over the New Orleans Saints, that Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot are out as head coach and general manager of this team. We'll talk about how we got here, what's next for this team, where does Matt Ryan figure into this, who are some of the top candidates for both of these roles that we will have to keep our eyes on in the coming weeks and over the next month or so. as this process unfolds. But Terry and Raheem are gone, and of course the question is, how did we get here, right? And essentially the reason why we got here is when Raheem Morris was hired in 2024, obviously Terry Fontenot was hired in 2021. The expectations for Raheem going into that 2024 season that he was supposed to win. The expectations were that Terry Fontenot, in his 3 years as the general manager here in Atlanta up to that point, had built a playoff caliber roster. That the shortcomings of that 2023 Falcon team stemmed from the head coach in Arthur Smith and stemmed from the quarterback in Desmond Ridder. And that the Falcons could figure that, and they deemed Raheem Morris to be that coach. And they then subsequently deemed Kirk Cousins to be that quarterback that would get them over the hump to being the playoff team. And it didn't work with Kirk Cousins. And obviously the Falcons also selected Michael Penix with that top 2024 draft pick. And they basically were like, well, okay, it didn't work with Kirk Cousins in 2024. Well, it's going to work in 2025 with Michael Penix. And it didn't work. And that's really those two bets. That's all the Falcons really needed to get over the hump, was that bet on those quarterbacks was really the bet that kind of blew up in Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot's faces. That, as you've heard me say many times on this podcast over the years, over the months, over the weeks, this team was far too complacent about how good a football roster they had already built, and far too complacent about how far they needed to go in order to get over that hump, to go from the perennial 7-win team that they were under Arthur Smith and previous coaches. And all Raheem Morris and the quarterbacks did were add one more win to those totals with 2 8-9 finishes. And that clearly was not good enough for ownership. It wasn't good enough for this fan base, and that's how we got here. And the hope is that this firing, because the rumors over the last 48 hours had been that Raheem was going to stay and Terry was going to go and all that sort of stuff, and it just felt like it was a half measure. It felt like, once again, the Falcons were going to be complacent, believing that, hey, because they played really well in some primetime games in front of, national TV audience, that, the perception of this team was once again going to be, hey, we just got to tweak a couple of things and we'll be right there. And hopefully this move now means that the Falcons are not going to be in that mindset, or not going to be in that complacent mindset, and they're actually going to do the work to become a better football team, as opposed to just believing that they can take shortcuts, which is what they've been trying to do for the better part of a decade. Right? They'll get new people in the building. Those new people will not be beholden to this roster, right? That was never going to be the case with Terry Fontenot. Terry Fontenot was going to believe my roster is great. We have conviction, all the stuff that Terry Fontenot spews. And they were just going to basically run it back with basically the same team. They were going to have the ultimate faith in their roster, in the roster that they already built. It was already good enough. We just need to tweak it. We just need to adjust it. And, I think more than anything, that not only obviously had an impact on Terry Fontenot's status, right? But I think that was probably the biggest reason for the downfall of Raheem Morris, is that he had far too much confidence in the roster, in the middling roster that ultimately it proved to be over and over and over and over again, 5 times in a row. The middling roster that Terry Fontenot had. And if Raheem had come in here and been a little bit more aggressive with being like, yeah, Terry, you've gotten us 40% up the mountain. We got to get the other 60% up, as opposed to what they essentially did, which is like, oh, we're already like 80% up the mountain. We just got to get the last 20%, right? If Raheem come in there with that type of mentality, I think this team, and been a lot more aggressive with some of the moves that they made over the last 2 off seasons, particularly in free agency, maybe a little less aggressive in the draft, but, have been a lot more aggressive with that and getting immediate contributors in free agency. I think this team probably would have found success under Raheem Morris. I really do believe that. But obviously they did not do that. And, you couple that mistake with the fact that the on-field product just wasn't very good under Raheem Morris, right? We talked about this throughout the season, like when talking about Raheem Morris's job status, where it's like, if you're going to run it back with Raheem, why? What is it that Raheem is bringing to the table as a head coach that you're like, sign me up for more of that, right? The main thing with Raheem, because he's not really calling plays on offense or defense, is his clock management, right? His in-game management. Subpar, simply put, right? You're not talking about a team that plays up to their potential every single week, right? If this was a Dan Campbell-led Lions team that we saw, you go back to that first year under Dan Campbell, where that team was one of the worst rosters in the NFL, but were consistently competitive each and every week, we'd be having a different conversation. But this team played up to their competition and also played down to their competition, and you never knew which version of the Atlanta Falcons you were going to get. And then it's like the other aspect of being a head coach is hiring good coordinators. And Raheem didn't hire good coordinators, right? You give the Jeff Ulbrich hire, the redo of the defensive coordinator hire that he had after the failure of Jimmy Lake in year one in 2024. You do the redo of that DC hire with Jeff Ulbrich in 2025, and you get that A+. But that's 1 out of 4 coordinator hires that Raheem Morris had made. Successful ones, right? Ulbrich was a successful one. Zach Robinson didn't live up to the hype. Jimmy Lake certainly didn't live up to the hype. That's why he got fired. And Marcus Williams didn't live up to the hype, right? That's not a good, hit rate, 1 of 4. And even if you did give him a do-over to redo the offensive coordinator hire and the special teams hire this offseason, and by keeping him, even if he hit on both of those, you still have a 3 for 6, right? A 50-50 proposition when it comes to coordinators. Like, how many swings are you going to get with that? Even if it gets over the hump, and then, if it does get you over the hump, then, those guys are going to leave, and then you got to hire new coordinators, and, how many swings are you going to get? So ultimately, I think the Falcons made the right decision, right? It felt like the Falcons under Raheem Morris were destined for another disappointing 7 or 8 win season. Maybe their ceiling was 9, maybe 10 wins if everything went their way next year. But there was really no path for this team to get significantly better with the current decision makers here because of a lot of the poor decisions made by Terry Fontenot, because of not having the draft capital, of not having any cap space, right? We talked about this on previous episode, but we talked about this this time last year. Everybody wanted Terry Fontenot gone. And I sat here on this podcast and said, I want to see if Terry can dig himself out of the hole. And Terry's solution to digging himself out of the hole was digging even deeper, right? By giving the team less draft capital, by giving the team less cap space, all for this notion of, hey, if we just get the pass rushers in here, it'll solve our problems. And sure, you solved the pass rush, but it didn't solve the rest of the team problems because there were other issues. That's the issue. This team constantly misdiagnoses its problems. They don't self-evaluate. They look at their team and they say, we only have 1 problem to solve when they have 5 problems to solve. And that was not going to change by running it back with either Terry Fontenot or Raheem Morris this offseason. And that needs to change, essentially, until this team can look at themselves honestly in the mirror and realize, yes, we have 4 or 5 things that we need to address, as opposed to constantly convincing themselves that they only have 1 or 2. Things were not going to get better.